Maddie catches Dave hosting an office limbo party and challenges him to behave like an adult for a week. Also, some guy gets kidnapped or something, but really, Maddie challenges Dave to behave like an adult for a week. Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to Battle of the Network shows. I'm Mike.
And I'm Rick. Hello, everybody.
And today we're talking about a show that we kind of hinted at during our Cheers episode, and it's also a little bit of a listener request, right?
Yes.
We're not doing the episode request.
Correct.
Suggested.
The series was suggested. I believe a friend of the show mentioned a specific episode. I think he might have even said, "Is that a little too on the nose?"
Yeah.
And I think generally if you notice, we generally pick something that's representative, but not necessarily the most famous episode of a series. Although we'll talk about that if it's appropriate. But
yeah.
In this case, he had suggested The Dream Sequence Always Rings Twice, which is one of the most famous episodes.
Oh, Moonlighting.
Oh, yes, Moonlighting.
We haven't said the show. Yeah.
But yeah, Moonlighting was a series that I liked a lot back in the day, and I think it's been orphaned a little bit, and maybe doesn't get the attention it deserves for a variety of reasons I'm sure we'll get into, but I think it's a good one to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. And back in part of its lifespan, I don't remember now exactly when I started watching, or if I stopped watching when it sort of ran into trouble. But I think I started watching during the second season, like once people were talking about it. Right. I remember being in 8th grade and like having one of those teachers who sometimes, enjoyed socializing more than starting the class. And like moonlighting being a topic of discussion.
Was Howard Hessman your teacher?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. You were in the IEP, the Genius program?
It was, yeah.
Okay.
It actually was the gifted class.
Okay.
Yeah, and probably watching with my brother, I think. Mm-hmm. So, anyway, but then in preparation for this, I watched the pilot, and nothing about that seemed familiar.
Yeah.
Like the episode we're going to talk about is kind of as soon as it started got going, all sorts of things were coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because this is a pretty sophisticated show for kids that were our age to be watching.
Yeah.
But I think it kind of illustrates the fact that despite what maybe the reputation now might be, it's kind of like a sophisticated romantic comedy, and it is geared towards adults, but it was actually a pretty big hit back in its day. It was not like an obscure show at all. It was a mainstream hit.
Yeah. I guess everybody was talking about it. I mean, it's with fewer choices, something like this had the more potential on a network to jump out.
Right.
Well, now it probably, like once a season, a network tries something weird.
Yeah.
And it usually doesn't stick.
Yeah.
But cable would probably do something like this. Maybe.
Yeah.
But then would it last? Like they were saying on the DVD documentaries that it was a really expensive show to make. Mm-hmm. And they benefited because it seems like before really networks could do this, but somehow ABC owned it, or their studio owned it. There was some way that they were making more money from it than they normally would, so they could afford to spend more money than they normally would.
Yeah, it seems weird. Like they were financing it.
Yeah.
But they essentially backed off. I mean, there were some good and bad things about that.
Yeah.
They allowed a bigger budget and seemingly allowed pretty much creative control. And as a result, there was a lot of risks taking the show, and it felt different. I mean, I think people were talking about it because there were things to talk about. Compared to some of the other things that were on TV at the time, especially network television, this was really fresh and even groundbreaking.
And it was also twisting an established sort of subgenre of detective shows with the male-female detective partnership, like Heart to Heart, or even someone mentioned Scarecrow and Mrs. King.
Yeah.
Things like that were established, but this was because the writer had no interest in doing that.
Right.
Was something totally different. And I think, we'll get into this, and really the detective part, I really don't care about that at all.
Yeah.
That's
right.
And it's very thin in this episode, I think.
Yeah, anyway. Something even going back to like Macmillan and Wife or something like that.
Yeah.
It was maybe more of an emphasis on the plots and the mysteries.
Right.
I mean, it was part of like the mystery movie or the mystery wheel or something like that. And Whereas in something like Moonlighting, it's really kind of obligatory.
Yeah.
The fact that there's a mystery at all.
Right.
And even oftentimes a half-hearted one at that.
Yeah. I guess Remington Steele would be the other
Right.
example of the time, which I don't know that show enough. And that had a little bit of the romantic comedy part too, right?
Yes, I think it had a bit of a light touch, I believe. I didn't watch it at the time, but I think that was part of it.
And who knew that 80s network television would be the breeding ground for 90s action stars?
That's true, yes. That's another thing, too, because, like, Bruce Willis became a movie star while the show was still in the air.
Yeah.
And made Die Hard.
Right.
Which made him pretty much, like, a cool guy for people our age.
Yeah.
Right at that time. And the show itself started declining kind of around that time. But, I mean, Bruce Willis was pretty cool to, I think, like, our generation that grew up kind of watching that movie and enjoying it.
Yeah. Now, maybe it's too early to ask this question, but was that also the beginning of the end of this Bruce Willis? Like other than Hudson Hawk?
Yeah.
After he became an action star, the sort of fun, loose Bruce Willis seems to have vanished, at least in the movies.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good point.
I mean, I guess Die Hard, those have a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think the Die Hard movies kind of stand on their own a little bit, and then, but yeah, a lot of it was either pretty serious Bruce or like self-parody Bruce, which like Hudson Hawk kind of veered into that, where it just feels like indulgent.
Right.
And then on what part of the continuum are the Seagram's commercials that we talked about long ago?
They're still...
I mean, that's kind of like a hybrid of both approaches almost.
Yeah, I feel like that's in keeping with Moonlighting more, especially like the one we're not talking about, the black and white one. There was a scene that basically was a Seagram's commercial,
right,
where he's in this dream. He's a cornet player, and he's sitting in a window in
at night,
a sleeveless undershirt,
right,
neon lights out there, and he says in the narration, "I was playing my trumpet shirtless in the window with a neon light, like." Because I look good that way, or something like that, and it was perfect. But then it's like, yeah, you did that like a year later or something in a commercial.
Well, I think you could definitely argue that this Bruce Willis was never the same after Die Hard and his movie career exploded, and even some of the people behind the scenes on the show seem to hint at that, not necessarily saying it, but just kind of saying that he got too big for the show, and he really kind of did.
Yeah.
Especially with all that was going on and the production turmoil, in a sense. Well, who can blame him? But yeah, I think this was the ideal Bruce Willis. I don't think he was ever again as relaxed and loose as he was in the show. Partly because he became a movie star, and it was just tough for him to do stuff like this because he was Bruce Willis. Yeah. Even in something like Pulp Fiction, that was kind of like seen as kind of almost returning him to something, like taking advantage of his star power. But it was like, oh, Bruce Willis is kind of like being in this gonzo, almost independent movie again. It was like a return.
But he was his character in that is very kind of quiet, right?
He's
or not quiet, but
taciturn.
Low key.
Yeah.
Compared to
right
everyone else.
Yes, good point. Yeah.
Which to me is Bruce Willis dramatic acting is just, I'll just talk like this.
Yeah, and kind of, and like a real
furrow my eyebrows and
air of melancholy, like Sixth Sense.
Yes.
And Unbreakable and
and he's good in that stuff.
Yeah, and even like 12 Monkeys, like things like that, where there's just some kind of like darkness over it.
Right.
That you don't really see here in Moonlighting. You know, seems to have a past, but he seems to be more of that devil may care kind of thing.
Yeah, with a sensitive side underneath it.
Yes, exactly.
And
he
of course, there's the return of Bruno.
Yeah.
Which I think I wrote about that on our website.
Yes,
right?
you did.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I know I watched it, and I'm like, I wouldn't have watched it if I hadn't turned it into. But then I couldn't remember if I actually did write the thing I thought I wrote.
Yes, Bruno. Of course, like sort of his alter ego.
Right.
His musical alter ego. A persona that he adopted for multimedia back around this time.
Oh, yeah.
And he was the one who had something. He was the unproven one. Sybil Shepherd, however, had a pretty distinguished career before this show. Maybe not as big a star at the time, but kind of saw herself probably that way. And she was the established person on Moonlighting, which was kind of an interesting dynamic. And then when things started changing a little bit, maybe that kind of created some of the infamous tension between the two. But she had been in The Last Picture Show, and she'd been on the ill-fated NBC soap opera Yellow Rose. I think Sam Elliott might have been in that too, but she'd had some attempts at TV.
Yeah.
But I think maybe at this point it was kind of more on reputation than other things.
Right.
And kind of needed needed Moonlighting, but she kind of went in as the star, really, and Bruce Willis was the kind of one that they took a chance on.
Yeah, I mean, he was nobody.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know what he had done before that.
Right. And actually, it's one thing that I thought was kind of interesting. You might have seen, and some of the DVD extras. At some point, somebody says that the one thing, I think Glenn Gordon Caron, who created the show, I think he says that the network told him, they begged him not to have the two of them get together romantically.
Right.
And you might assume, like from a modern day perspective, and this is something that I want to get into, that it's because that'll kill the tension of the show and kill it creatively. But no, the fact was they could not believe that Sybil Shepherd's character would ever want to get with Bruce Willis's character. Right. They thought he was so undesirable and that they were such on different strata that the audience would never buy this two as a couple, which is amazing to think about.
Because he's so ugly.
Yeah. Yeah, and just like lower class and everything. And of course, the instant chemistry between the two is what carried the show for not nearly as long as it should have, but as long as it did.
Yeah. Yeah, that was weird. But that it sounded like as soon as Bruce Willis walked in the door, as in his audition, that he just took over the room and they knew he was the guy. Yeah. Which is pretty cool too. Yeah. Other than convincing the network and all that. But right. Yeah, I mean that's an amazing part of this. And I liked in those DVD extras, which are like 10, 15 years old now, but one, that Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd participated. Yeah. And two, they seemed pretty humble about, or maybe not humble, but proud of the show and could recognize in retrospect, that they were doing something special. And I mean, she basically said it's the best thing she ever did. Yeah. Sybil Shepherd in particular kind of expresses regret that she didn't enjoy it more when it was on and seems to kind of, be a little regretful that she didn't appreciate it and appreciate what they were doing as much, because it does hold up pretty well now. And I kind of look at Moonlighting as almost like an athlete who's really great for like 3 or 4 years, and you think, well, do they deserve, did they have a Hall of Fame career? It's like, well, they had a huge peak, but maybe there's a big injury or something, or, they bet on the sport and get thrown out in ignominious fashion or something like that. But they have that incredible peak, but just not the longevity. And Moonlighting is kind of like that. It had like a couple of seasons and maybe a couple dozen like fantastic episodes, but then a really precipitous decline, which kind of makes you think, well, and maybe that explains why the show, I think it's fondly remembered, but it doesn't have like that status in the pantheon that it probably should. I mean, right. It's almost one of the great what ifs for me. Like, what if Moonlighting could have gotten its act together and had like 100 episodes or something like that? But then again, I mean, they had troubles. I mean, there's a reason for it. It was an expensive show. They were always over budget and out of time, and they struggled each season to get episodes on the air. So maybe it was never meant to be. And I know part of that was the on-set tension, but part of it wasn't. Right. It was more just production stuff and writing stuff and struggling just to get the show done. Yeah. I think in time to get it on air, which they were talking about like shooting scenes the same day as the show aired. Sometimes. Yeah. I'm like from our undisclosed work background. I'm like, whoa. Yeah, like sending the show out blind, pretty much to affiliates and everything like that. Right. Which is pretty incredible. But yeah, apparently like Glenn Gordon Caron had a lot of attention to detail. Was always tinkering with the scripts, and it took him a while to write them. And even when he wasn't directly involved with writing the scripts, they were obsessing over production details. Like, for example, the black and white episode you mentioned, the dream sequence always rings twice. Yeah. It was an homage to noir movies in 40s cinema, and they really took pains, as you can tell in the DVDs, to get that right. But that's time-consuming and expensive, and they did that attention to detail on every episode. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot more going on even behind the scenes for a movie that essentially, it seems like maybe the appeal of it is two people arguing. Right. It's a very reductive way to say it, but that is the appeal of it. However, technically, they took great care to present the show, too, and I think it took its toll on everybody. Yeah, and I imagine the editing was probably difficult, too. Yeah. Because of all the quick dialogue and the back and forth, and like they're saying, they don't just stick to close-ups. Right. And coverage and all that. They'll be cutting back and forth in the middle of an argument with dialogue overlapping the cuts, and it seems really complicated. Yeah, scripts were very long, and the actors had to learn the lines, and they were shooting particularly Sybil Shepherd with the soft lenses and everything, and all kinds of things going on. And what were they saying? If they needed to make up time, they would shoot driving scenes. Oh yeah. Where they're kind of just the two of them, but they were saying that they're so into it that they're always forgetting to pretend to drive. And
yeah.
And then the actors, Sybil Shepherd said they would have the dialogue, taped to the dashboard.
Right. I think at one point, Glenn Gordon Cairn said he had them, Sybil Shepherd getting out of an elevator one day just because he was still writing pages and they needed something to shoot.
Uh-huh.
So I think he essentially gave them busy work by having them shoot her coming out of an elevator while he was still like furiously trying to finish some scene or something like that. So, I mean, that's pretty chaotic, and that must be difficult for anybody in any kind of creative environment to have that kind of instability. But at the same time, it did often lead to fantastic results.
And the episode we're going to talk about is called My Fair David, and it's from the second season.
It is indeed.
So the first season was the pilot and 5 episodes.
Yeah, I think so. Like a total of 6 episodes if you count the pilot.
Yeah, which was like they did often in a pilot movie. And then was the second season a full season, or was it a?
I believe it was about 18 episodes, so full for Moonlighting. Yeah. Not necessarily full for anybody else.
Yeah.
And even in season 2, as a matter of fact, I believe at the beginning of season 2, in the first episode, there's a scene with David Addison and Maddie Hayes, like in character, sort of commenting on the fact that they had time to fill. Mm-hmm. And so they were doing this little scene because the episode was short. So even at the beginning of the second season, they're having issues with these kind of things. I mean, in this case, they had time to fill because they were short. So clearly the production issues were already surfacing even that early, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. I guess before we get into the episode, in case people didn't watch this or don't remember it, the basic setup is from the pilot is that Sybil Shepherd's character, Maddie Hayes, is a fashion model, and her business managers or accountants stole all her money. Mm-hmm. But she has these companies that they had kind of set up. They were all money losers. They were tax write-offs.
Right.
And she goes and looks at these companies. We only see the one, which is a detective agency managed, in quotes, by Bruce Willis's character, David Addison.
Right.
And through the course of that episode, they sort of accidentally solve a crime.
Yeah.
And then that leads them to actually, her to keeping the agency open and then becoming a legitimate sort of detective agency.
Yeah, the Blue Moon Detective Agency,
yes.
Which I think is named after the shampoo that she endorsed, or one of the products.
Yeah.
Which
includes the ingredients include moonbeams.
Ah, okay. Well, that would explain it. Yes. But it's amazing because there's so many people that work at the Blue Moon Detective Agency, and it always amazes me, like, what are all these people doing?
I had forgotten that. I thought it was just them and Miss DePesto.
Right. Miss DePesto, Alice Beasley, their secretary. Secretary is kind of reductive because she's really like their assistant receptionist and office manager, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah. Positive reinforcement.
Yes. But again,
moral center.
Yeah, confidant.
Yeah.
In a way, but yeah, again, it's like and I guess this is what Maddie is always wondering, especially in the first couple seasons. She threatens many times to close down the agency, and it just seemed like there's a lot of dead weight around there because they never get any cases. But there's all these people in suits walking around, like maybe sitting at desks and like, what are they doing? Yeah. They don't have the internet back then. They can't be killing time on the internet.
Nope.
What are they doing at these computer terminals? Are they? I don't even know.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if those computers would even have like Snake or something on.
Yeah.
They're just sitting there like David Putty, just staring at the screen.
Yeah.
For 8 hours.
Yeah, apparently.
Waiting for David Addison to do something fun.
Right. Which, that maybe isn't such a bad existence. No. You're getting a paycheck if you're getting paid on time.
Yeah. And then in the later seasons, Curtis Armstrong got involved.
Yeah.
But we missed out on him in this episode.
Yeah, correct. This is still pretty, like you said, this is maybe not even a dozen episodes into the show's run. Let me just mention, though, this aired October 29th, 1985. And let me set some context. It was on 9 p.m. And when we talk about everybody talking about this show, well, look at what else was on, okay? Mm-hmm. On ABC before, it was Who's the Boss and Growing Pains.
Right.
In my experience, everybody was not talking about Who's the Boss and Growing Pains. And, understandably, like, what are people going to talk about with Who's the Boss and Growing Pains?
Well, as we know, whether Mike used cocaine or not.
Okay, well, that one time, maybe. Yeah. Maybe.
And, of course, Who's the Boss had the same incredible sexual tension as Moonlighting.
Of course, yes. Very similar.
Will Tony and Angela do it or not?
Yeah, quite a dynamic.
Yeah.
And for our 2 to 11-year-old demographic, by do it we mean like will they like make cookies together?
Right. Yeah.
Because that was something they teased throughout the whole run.
Yeah.
And do you know what was after Moonlighting on this night? It was a little bit closer in tone to Moonlighting than Moonlighting was to Who's the Boss and Growing Pains. To me, Moonlighting seems tonally different than Who's the Boss and Growing Pains, and it amazes me that they were on together.
Right, and well, the odds are that on Moonlighting someone did use cocaine.
Yes.
Higher than the odds that Mike Seaver did.
Yes, I think you're right. Right.
Ooh. Can you give me a hint?
I'm putting you on the spot. It's a show that we have talked about. We have not covered on the show.
Uh-huh.
It's something that would be cool to talk about one day, and it has not been widely seen. It's not an obscure property.
Yeah.
But it's something the TV show has not been widely seen since then. It was on maybe 3 years, I think, on ABC, probably more or less in the 10 p.m. time slot.
Yeah, nothing's ringing a bell.
Spencer for Hire.
Oh, yeah.
So you go from Who's the Boss and Growing Pains to Moonlighting to Spencer for Hire, and to me it's like that 8 o'clock block just does not belong.
No.
But maybe some kids stuck around for the whole night.
Maybe.
NBC had A-Team, Riptide, which was a very popular show, but I think Moonlighting kind of knocked Riptide out of the top 10, I believe, which is kind of... There's a lot to go into there, but we'll save that for our Riptide episode.
It is not Boss at all.
And Remington Steele, which we talked about earlier. And CBS this night, now this was a special night because it was close to Halloween. So we had a Garfield special, followed by It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, and then a movie called Into Thin Air. This is a contemporary television movie, not the later mountain climbing book. But
right.
And I just want to point out something when I was doing a little research, which we'll get into like maybe the decline of the show later. But so on this night, Moonlighting was the most popular rated show of all of them. So that kind of shows that it was a hit even then. But several years later, in its 5th season, the finale was kind of buried on a Sunday night, but it lost its time slot to pretty much everything, including the fledgling Fox network in 1989 had America's Most Wanted and Married with Children. So America's Most Wanted and Married with Children each beat the last episode of Moonlighting, which that just goes to show you by, episode 66 or 67 or whatever it was, Moonlighting had really gone downhill.
Yeah, I mean, Fox beating anyone at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But flashing back a little bit, 1985, the show was doing well. It had actually been preempted the week before for the World Series. But here on Tuesday night, it's Moonlighting, it's here, and the episode, yes, My Fair David, which I think is a great episode.
Yeah.
Definitely, I think it's peak Moonlighting. You could argue about some of the other famous episodes, but to me, it's a quintessential example, which we'll get into, but this shows why people love the show, I think.
Yeah. It just gets to the heart of what the show is about. And there's a kidnapping thing.
Yes, there is. And like actually on the DVD, there's a DVD commentary, and even on the DVD commentary, I think it's Bruce Willis. People aren't even sure what happened to
I'm not sure what happened.
They're not sure how the mystery resolves itself because they really they don't bother with it too much.
Right.
So don't get too wrapped up in it, but it does have an interesting guest star.
Oh yeah.
Well, Barbara Bain.
Okay.
From Mission Impossible.
Oh. Yeah.
And
I didn't know her.
Yeah, she's the
client.
Yes, the client looking for answers for a kidnapped victim. Yeah.
Her stepson. Oh, another brief, interesting guest star. Not the stepson, but one of the guys that beats him up is Billy Drago.
Yes.
From who played Frank Nitti in the Untouchables movie.
Yeah, he was played a lot of heavies in various 1980s
creeps
TVs and movies. Yeah, that's perfect. Yes.
And the other guy I recognize too, but I don't know his name. Just from playing roles like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. He looked like a second-rate John Shuck, but
second-rate John Shuck.
They're only in one scene, so
we're gonna get to more to John Shuck eventually.
Eventually,
I think we've underserved him on the podcast. This might be his finest moment, having somebody compared unfavorably to him.
So there's this guy who's a classical pianist, but also a gambler, and he owes some money, and he gets beat up.
Yeah, and I think this was kind of a pattern with the show. It seemed like, and this is something that I really forgot until kind of going back and watching some of these, but they would often start with some sequence setting up like the mystery element,
Okay.
and you wouldn't even necessarily get to David and Maddie until maybe after the credits.
Yeah.
But so they would have something just kind of setting it up with like almost like a cold open where you don't really know who the characters are, and this is your introduction to the plot.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happens here.
Right. Yeah, and then we get to David and Maddie.
Yeah. And so back at the Blue Moon Detective Agency,
Yes.
they're having a good time.
Yeah. When the cat's out,
Yeah.
that's the phrase, right?
When the cat's away, the mice will play, right?
Yeah. It's a limbo party
Yeah.
led by your cruise director, David Addison.
Yeah. It's been a while since we've had a limbo party at our workplace, Mike.
Yeah. I don't mean to tell you. I shouldn't tell you this, but what do you think happens when you leave?
Oh. Oh, wow. All right, it's been a while since I've been at a limbo party at our workplace. But everybody's having a ball, and David is enthusiastically leading everybody in this limbo party.
Yeah.
He's clearly the ringleader.
He's got his shades.
Yeah, clearly the organizer. He's singing.
Yeah, he's singing the song.
Yeah. The limbo song, I guess.
Yeah, they do have music on a boombox. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he's singing into a toilet paper tube
Yeah.
as a microphone.
He's nothing if not resourceful.
Yeah. So this really is when I say, what happened to that Bruce Willis?
Yeah.
This is what I mean.
Right.
You don't see John McClane
Yeah.
having a limbo party.
True. No, and I think he actually it shows some restraint on the character because I'm surprised that I don't know when karaoke machines became a thing, but
Yeah.
I'm surprised he didn't have like a real working microphone or
Right.
that he had to improvise. It was probably doing a favor by not spending company money on high-end audio equipment for these parties.
Yeah. Yeah. Back in the day when it was before Maddie was there, when it was supposed to lose money,
Yeah.
he probably did have a PA system.
True. I would think. Not that he necessarily needed one.
Yeah.
He's a dynamic enough personality that he can make himself heard probably all over the office. And clearly everybody is having a good time.
They are.
And it's a party. It's definitely a party atmosphere.
Yeah. And of course, Maddie walks in on this scene.
Yeah. And everybody just feels like they're busted.
Yeah.
It just kind of like, uh-oh.
Yeah. And so she was supposed to be at the dentist. And
Yeah.
she got out early.
Yeah.
And then that leads to a lot of fighting.
Yeah, she takes exception to the scene.
Yes.
And it leads to maybe like some of like the 5 to 10 funniest minutes of anything I've seen in a long time, because she's going like getting on his case about this, and he's coming back every single thing she says. Yeah. He's got some kind of like wiseacre response to it.
Right.
I mean, it really is hilarious.
Yeah. This was my thought during that, especially during that. Is that basically he's Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
Or Groucho.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate for Sybil Shepherd maybe that means she's Elmer Fudd, but
yeah, or Margaret Dumont either.
Margaret, yes. But she holds her own in those scenes. She's really good in this show.
Yeah.
But it does mean that generally she's playing the uptight person.
Yeah, she is.
The straight man, and he gets to be the wacky guy, and you can't help but like him.
Right.
Even when, he's not always in the right. But.
No. And in fact, I think you could argue that he's clearly in the wrong in this case.
Yeah.
It is unprofessional, and she's, upset that people are just wasting time. It's kind of her business, and
yeah,
it's a place of business. And I think one thing that's kind of interesting though is like even in the pilot, I was surprised kind of rewatching that a while ago to see that a lot of the elements of the show are right there from the beginning, and even like the affection that they have for each other. And I think like at times they pulled back on that, and this is kind of an example where you can kind of see that there's something there. They're not totally, they are arguing, but I think this one they amped up like the tension a little bit. And some of the other episodes kind of leading up to this, they really amped up like the affection between the two of them. And every now and then I think this would be a big trigger for it, would be like the situation, the fact that the detective agency is doing so poorly causes like a lot of the tension because, they're losing money and she has to like rein him in sometimes.
Yeah.
And this is kind of an episode where they play up like the confrontational aspects of it.
And the way she talks about it is really, she's talking about a relationship that she's tried to relax some and learn some things from him.
Right.
And he hasn't, in her eyes, done anything to change.
Yeah.
And that she sees it as a relationship, especially when it's two people who are so sort of different, that they find a balance by taking a little bit from each other rather than making both of them behave exactly the same.
Exactly.
But he hasn't been playing ball.
Right. And it's a legitimate point by her. And at the time watching it, I probably thought, oh, who cares what she says? He's Bugs Bunny, he's Groucho Marx. Those are two of my favorites, and he's one of my favorites. He's hilarious.
Yeah.
But now, is a little bit more mature as well. I can kind of see her point.
Yeah. But he's still really funny.
Yes, he is. Yeah. I mean, she's just like sitting there, and she's trying to, and not only that, but she's telling him this, and he's not taking her seriously. He's just coming back with like all these comments, like and you know what really hurts? She's like, yeah, when you get a pimple on the inside of your nose, and she cuts him off. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
and it's really good. I guess the way they had already established the office. There's the main office, then they each have offices, but they're on the opposite sides.
Yeah.
So they're kind of walking back and forth and slamming doors, and
yes,
Mr. Pesto especially is watching this go on, and everybody can hear it all out in the main area, but the bullpen, I guess. But that really works. Mm-hmm. Like that's a nice theatrical kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah. Really, if you wanted to show someone the show, you could just show them this, like you said, 5 minutes.
Yeah. I think if you're not into that show after watching that, you'll never be into it. But I think a lot of people would just be like, oh, I got to see more of this.
It leads to them, really her, coming up with this idea for a bet, which is that he can behave like a mature adult for 1 week.
Yeah.
But that means no smart remarks, no singing.
Yeah, he's appalled at the no singing.
Yes.
He thinks that goes too far. That's really cutting to the essence.
Yeah.
Of who he is.
And a few other things like that.
Yeah.
No limbo parties.
Right, yeah.
I think the initial rules are going to be if she wins, meaning he doesn't behave like an adult the whole time, that he's going to have to fire 2 people.
Yeah.
And if he wins, he's going to get $3,000, and she's going to limbo.
Right. Yeah.
But there's also somewhere in there's a bit where they're walking across the bullpen.
Yes.
And he's already agreed to this, to be serious, and she's talking, and he's right behind her, like making dumb faces. And
like
walking like an idiot.
Yeah, exactly. And then she turns around and, instantly snaps to attention and, acts like normal. And he's acting like the whole time like it's no big deal.
Right.
Like, oh, of course I can do this,
Yeah.
and is totally confident and doesn't see why he thinks it's easy money and everything he says it, but.
Right.
But he's obviously, he's already mocking it, right from the beginning.
Yeah. And there was a phone call where he was talking very seriously.
Yeah.
Which reminded me of the Seinfeld where George is upset that Jerry's being too funny. So then...
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
The world was very terrible.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, even then, it's kind of a put on. And they have some good reactions by Maddie, because she's looking at him answering the phone like that, and she's kind of got this smirk on her face, like, well, okay, he's making a mockery of it, but at least he's doing it, so she kind of wants to see where it goes, I guess.
Yeah. And then they get to this, the woman comes to hire them, which is, it's a weird thing. So the pianist guy has been kidnapped. She got a ransom request for $100,000. He's apparently this is what he does. He's always pushing the edge of the envelope. She wants them to get him back, but try to bring down the ransom amount.
Yeah, let's negotiate a little bit.
And for every $1 they bring it down, they get something. I don't know. The more they get it down, the more money they'll make.
Yeah. And they could use the money. And this is the Barbara Bain character, and she kind of looks like a stereotypical, like, sort of wealthy widow or something like that.
Yes, like from a detective movie.
Right. She's like, made up a certain way, and I think she's got a cigarette, right? She's smoking. Does she even have like a cigarette holder, maybe?
Maybe. I think she's got one of those like turban-like hats.
Yeah, exactly. So she definitely looks the part of this type.
Yeah.
Kind of like a character that you might see, like an older woman, like in a hard-boiled detective story or something.
Yes, or like from Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah. Right.
She's ready for her close-up.
Mm-hmm.
So they take the case again. It's the case. But when they go to make the drop, of course, there's lots of discussion about the bet and everything, and one of those car scenes, and oh yeah, and that's good too. Like David gets out and he's taking the money, and as soon as he's around the corner, he's like singing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And isn't that where he like insists that she stay in the car?
Yeah.
And it's sort of like evidence that he's making an adult, mature decision.
That's right.
Like because they're better off as the agency's interests are better off if she waits and he takes the risk of going in and confronting whoever's kidnapped him.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then once he goes across the street, is he singing the Limbo song or I think or the same Limbo song?
I think so. Yeah.
But he's kind of back to normal.
He drops off the money, then runs to the roof to see if he can see the person who picked it up, and they chase him down the street, and it turns out it's the guy.
Yeah.
It's like a fake kidnapping.
Right.
It was a way to kind of get the money, but also it seemed like a weird gesture to simultaneously steal money from his stepmother, but not make her feel bad about it or something.
Right. Yeah, it's a little hazy, but
yeah. But somehow from that they get $50,000.
Yeah.
Which is a nice amount.
Right, and they decide not to. They don't share that information with their client.
Right, that's right. Oh, he gives them half of.
Right. I mean, he kind of talks them into just going along with it, and kind of reasons that everybody will be better off this way, and then you'll get the money, and
right.
And I think
like Maddie doesn't like that.
Yeah, David's more like, hey, this is we could use the money and everything, and kind of like trying to talk her out of feeling weird about it.
Yeah.
But they eventually do decide to, okay, won't give all the information to the client, and I guess they don't actually show that either.
No.
But they settle with the client as far as everybody's concerned.
Yeah, and then it seems that a little bit of time passed. I'm not sure what, but he's still being very serious, and the employees of Blue Moon don't like this.
Yeah, in fact, and maybe that's coming, but Ms. DePesto is famous for answering the phone with rhyming, messages, and he kind of like scolds her at one point.
Yes.
And says, Blue Moon Detective Agency, how may I help you? Like that's the way she should answer instead of with her normal, cheery, sing-songy rhyme. She's a little taken aback by things like that. But yeah, around the office, it's just not the same David.
No, and Maddie comes in for the day, and Mr. Pesto doesn't greet her, and when Maddie asks about that, Mr. Pesto gives her what for.
Yeah.
And says that she's de-Daved him.
Yeah, right.
And she's very upset about it.
She
in
is,
her way. I mean, she's not a yeller or anything.
No, but she's clearly distraught.
Yes. And I felt like watching it, like, if Mr. Pesto isn't happy with you, you probably feel it.
Yeah.
Her guilt trip.
Yeah, it carries a lot of weight.
Yeah.
I think with both of them, but in this case, definitely Maddie.
And I think she even says, I don't think I like you anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, she said something like pretty. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is, Maddie's having some second thoughts about things.
Right. Like on one hand, like the agency's got this influx of money, and she expects everybody else to be happy.
Yeah.
And kind of think that they're turning things around, but she's a little stunned to find out that they're not, and this is the reason why.
Yeah. And David's hasn't come in yet. And then the lady comes back, and her stepson has been kidnapped again.
Yeah, how about that?
Fishy.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to. There's a new drop, and then there's like this really tight time schedule to meet it, and it's like one of these things where they go to one place and find a clue that takes them to the next place or a message, and they do that, and they get there just in time to see the van that the guy is in explode.
Yeah, quite a spectacle.
Yeah. And then they're both kind of upset about that.
Yeah. Well,
because they feel like it's their fault.
Yeah, they feel like if they would have been up front, this guy presumably got blown up, would be safe.
Yeah. And they go and tell the woman that he's dead. But then they're driving from there, and Maddie says something about, I've never seen somebody blown to bits before.
Yeah.
And David realizes that there were no bits.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's kind of funny when he's talking about that.
Right. He's like working it out in his head, and
so they realize he's alive. They never go and verify that.
Right. I think that's one thing that it's kind of unclear, like what actually happened to him. And I mean, you can assume wasn't in the van, but yeah.
And is it somewhere during that where he breaks he loses the bet?
Well, I think it's after he thinks that he's excited because they've solved the case.
Yeah.
and he kind of starts like, I guess how would you describe? Just kind of shuffling around and because on the street, like out in public, he starts.
He does some singing too.
Yeah, and I kind of had a problem with this actually because it was in service of a case. It was kind of a celebratory thing, and then she naturally seizes on it. Oh, actually, though, before that, though, she had actually told him that she kind of liked that she kind of hinted that she kind of missed the old David.
Right.
And kind of like, she didn't really renounce the bet exactly.
No.
But I kind of got the impression that she was kind of saying, look, it's not as important anymore.
Yeah.
So then later, when they actually kind of like get to the bottom of some of this stuff and he kind of celebrates, it's like out of nowhere, she kind of comes back and says, aha, you lost the bet, and then I thought that was a little unfair.
Yeah.
Because I'd kind of gotten the impression that, well, okay, the bet is kind of like secondary here.
Right.
When you thought like maybe somebody got blown up and everything like that, and it seemed to me like she was very selective in her kind of enforcement and her attitude towards it.
I can see that.
So I thought that was a little unfair of her.
Yeah.
Although, as we'll see, it's not the whole story, but...
They call the lady, they tell her her son's alive, but they'll come by and explain it to her. This is where it gets a little muddy. It turns out the second kidnapping that the woman did it herself, sort of. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is he dead?
Right. I mean, that's the thing I don't think they really resolved. But she had, had involvement, but we don't see the guy again, so...
Yeah, and she says that, like, if she had known the first one was fake, she wouldn't have done the second, or something, I don't know.
Right.
And really, again, it doesn't matter.
No. It's kind of an afterthought.
Yeah.
Although I guess she does threaten them.
Yeah, she does have a shotgun.
Yeah.
Or is it a shotgun or is it a pistol?
No, I think it's like a handgun, I think.
That's right, because she shoots and David pretends to get shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just an old PI trick, I guess.
Yeah. And then back at the office, David's ready to do what he's supposed to do and fire these two guys.
Yeah.
And this is where, in that case, Maddie kind of interrupts him and says, well, we finally found new parking spaces closer to the elevator.
Right. It's just as he's about to tell them something, some big news, obviously.
Yeah.
She kind of interjects and says that's what the news is.
And that's about it, right?
Yeah.
Is there another limbo party?
There's a little scene where, he's kind of in her office and kind of says, if you had lost, I would have made you limbo. And she says, yeah, I know, or something. Then, he just kind of smirks and that's the end. We freeze frame on that.
Wait. Bruce Willis kind of smirks.
Well, okay, he smirks, period. Yeah. The kind of is not necessary. Or I could just say, we see Bruce Willis.
Yes.
Cut to Bruce Willis.
But yeah, it's a fantastic episode.
It really is. It's hilarious, and I'm glad you kind of point out the contributions of Sybil Shepherd in this. Really, Bruce Willis is the one that gets all the funny lines, but she's a good counterpoint to him and gives him something to play off of.
Yeah. I was thinking, and I'm still thinking about it, like, there are things where the guy is sort of in her role, and the woman, like, the genders are reversed on that. But I can't think of anything with quite this type of energy. Like, the things I'm thinking of, like, the guy's usually kind of a nerd, like the Lady Eve.
Okay.
And the woman's street smart.
Yeah.
Or the guy's kind of a nerd or a stiff, and the woman is like I mean this in a positive way, but kind of wild or just a free spirit.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Okay.
Like Dharma and Greg.
Okay, yeah.
So, the greats, Lady Eve and Dharma and Greg. Or something like that, but...
Yeah. Or like Bringing Up Baby. Cary Grant is kind of like the more uptight professorial type, and Katharine Hepburn's character is the free spirit, exactly like you said. And she's more like unhinged or like more kind of liberated or free and everything. And I think Sybil Shepherd even says on the DVD that like she saw the series as reminiscent of those like Howard Hawks movies and things like that. So
yeah. So now Maddie is not a nerd. Mm-hmm. She's very sophisticated.
Yeah.
And of course she's beautiful and famous, but she is kind of uptight.
Yeah.
And sometimes he calls her cold, and but they question that in the dialogue like that, and she's hurt by that one.
Yeah.
Like in the pilot, he does a couple times.
Yeah.
But she does have a temper. Again, sometimes it's justified.
Yeah.
But, I can't imagine being around a guy like that and not being annoyed sometimes.
Right. I mean, and the other thing is like there are detectives, and Bruce Willis does have a certain like street smart, or the David Addison character has a certain street smart quality. I mean, he's not super good at maybe some of the nuts and bolts of things, but when they're actually on a case, he has like these certain instincts that usually work pretty well.
Yeah.
when they're out in the field, working on a case or something like that.
Yeah, and she doesn't always trust that.
Right. So they're not incompetent.
Right. And I think maybe the idea of the show was what she was talking about, like that over time they do affect each other. He does mature some.
Mm-hmm.
She does soften or let herself be more vulnerable. I don't know if I haven't seen those later episodes in a long time, so I don't know if it succeeded at that, and then I know we're going to talk about that a little bit. But, and then it does, before we started recording, you were saying you'd watched the episode where they riff on Taming of the Shrew, and I was thinking about, like, Much Ado About Nothing, which has a famous sparring couple who, for most of it, they seem to have some past, but they're not a couple, but they're bickering and they're hitting each other with all sorts of barbs. And
was that a Fred Silverman show? Much Ado About Nothing?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
Right, as Rue McClanahan.
Right.
And
okay, yeah, I think I remember that now.
and I forget who the male lead was. It was
well, McLean Stevenson.
yes, it was Rue McClanahan and McLean Stevenson as a bickering.
Yeah, late 70s NBC folks.
Yeah, and they owned a store that sold nothing.
Yeah.
Right. But so you can see there are all sorts of precedents for this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Although Glenn Gordon Caron said in that, he hadn't seen those Howard Hawks movies.
Yeah, I was. That's what he says. I'm not 100% sure I believe him.
Yeah.
That he may have been exaggerating a little bit, but that's interesting.
Yeah. And Sybil Shepherd was like, "Well, we need to go watch those."
Yeah. I mean, so he said like he was watching like Meryl Streep and Raul Julia, like doing Shakespeare, I think, in like like a New York thing or something like that, and that's kind of what inspired him to do the series.
Okay.
And I think he also said in one of those extras, he said something like he liked the idea of like doing a detective show, but it always fascinated him because like you see detectives all over the place, but like you don't like walk down the street like where are all these detective agencies that you see on TV?
You never see them.
Yeah, but yet like here's this big Blue Moon detective agency that's just kind of right there, and hey,
yeah,
they're there.
Yep, with plenty of people.
Yeah.
To do work for you.
Yeah.
You really need it.
Right. I mean, maybe they got a lot of people doing like financial investigation and kind of more white collar things rather than gumshoe work.
Right. Yeah. I assume like a lot of times, they get a case and Dave and Maddie go out and do the fun stuff.
Yeah.
But they call like, oh, we need to,
Yeah.
Can you check some bank records? Can you do this?
And they don't.
Sure, Steve will do that.
Yeah. And the one thing you don't have really a lot of is like them having playful banter with some lieutenant, some beleaguered lieutenant on the police force. They're very outside the law.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're not, really hanging out at the police station fishing for cases or something. Or
although in the pilot there was so they witness a murder and they get taken in, and David wants to make his phone call and ends up ordering pizza for the cops.
That's right. Yeah.
Becoming their buddies.
Yeah. And from that scene in the pilot, you wouldn't be wrong in thinking maybe, oh, okay, this the kind of show it's going to be where they do have like that kind of this back and forth with the cops. But again, I think maybe once they de-emphasize the mystery and plot element, they decided they didn't really need a lot of that.
Yeah. So I think we have at least a couple more things to talk about.
Sure.
One, did the will they or won't they? Was that the thing that killed the show? And two, the theme song and the credits.
Why don't we take the theme song and the credits first?
Al Jarreau
Yeah.
wrote the lyrics, sings the song. It's a really cool song.
It is.
And it's perfect for this kind of show.
Right.
Jazzy, romantic.
Yeah, it's another kind of aspirational theme where, you find yourself like hearing the song and it makes you feel good and you kind of feel yourself wanting to live that song somehow. I mean, the song is, it just kind of does capture it. There's something romantic and glamorous about it, and just kind of like, but there's an elegance to it too.
Yeah.
That's really appealing and that really works.
The opening credits sequence, I had sort of forgotten it, but I really like that too. It's very unique. I mean, they use stills from the show, or some of them are from the show, but they've done them in such a way and combining with other pictures where they look like magazine pictures.
Yeah.
Or photographs. And again, there's something just kind of cool and classy about it. And so it's either stills from the show or like shots of LA and different places. And I think there are some magazine cover. Well, I might be getting that confused with another show we're going to talk about. But, but I think that's because of Maddie's background.
Yeah. The fashion model background.
But like a cool magazine.
Yeah, it's visually striking.
Yeah.
It's good. The only problem I have with the song is that we don't hear like the full version of it.
That's true.
It's frustrating, and especially like later in syndication when they did the reruns, they would totally cut it. And I think some of the episodes they would if they were having time issues. And
Right.
I was always like, oh, that's lame, you know.
Yeah.
Never liked that, but I think it's one of the best theme songs ever, and just perfect for the show. There's one problem I have with the lyrics though, and I'm not sure. Well, in some versions, maybe you wouldn't hear this in the actual show part, but you know, he says, "I'm just a stranger, loves the blues and the Braves." The blues and the Braves.
Maybe the Blues and the Grays.
Well, I wondered about this, but every version of the lyrics I've said blues and the Braves, and actually I've looked this up, and on Songfacts, one of these websites, it's there's no citation, but somebody says that Al Jarreau was a big sports fan and put that in there, and because he was a fan of like they were originally the Milwaukee Braves before they moved, and if you look at the lyrics, they capitalize blues and Braves as if he's talking about like the St. Louis Blues and the Milwaukee then Atlanta Braves, like as a sports reference. But why put that in the song? Like, you know,
It's jazz, man.
yeah. Yeah, that part always got me.
I don't know. All I remember, he does say moonlighting at some point.
Yeah.
And the last met on the way or whatever that is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, everything else is perfect, but the one line about who cares if you like the Blues and the Braves? And, like, why would David Addison, I mean, if you're thinking it from his point of view, which I sort of assumed it was.
It'd be the Yankees or the Mets.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, that part always kind of stuck out to me. And for years, I wasn't sure if it was Blues or Braves, but everybody seems to think that it is.
Weird.
And unfortunately, Al Jarreau's not around to clear this up for us.
You'd have to find some official sheet music to
there you go.
really verify that.
There you go. And see if it's capitalized, especially. Then we'll know.
That's
But and it's not even like, you know, they're teams from different regions. I mean, they're both from the Midwest, but like the St. Louis Blues and the Braves. I mean, what do they have to do with each other? I mean, what kind of fair weather fan likes both those teams? Although I guess Milwaukee didn't have a hockey team, so maybe, you know.
Yeah, maybe in the Midwest those were your choices.
I mean, I always thought, like, growing up, it was like the blues meaning like music.
Yes.
Like the blues and the breaks or something like that. Like maybe there's some kind of like poetic thing about, you know, the ups and the downs or something, but apparently not. Well,
Bizarre.
That's me and my soapbox. So other than that, I love the song.
That's really what sunk the show. Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd constantly arguing about the lyrics.
Yeah, the cumulative effect of that just killed it. You can't work with somebody if you can't agree on your show's theme song.
Yeah. Do you remember Al Jarreau's other big moment around this time?
What was that?
Appearing in We Are the World.
Ah, yes. Yeah, that was something.
Yeah.
And that would have been after this, right? Or before? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? That was 84
Yeah.
or 83?
I'm thinking maybe 84, 85-ish. 83 sounded a little early, but maybe 84.
I think maybe it was the early 84.
Okay.
Like the winter.
Okay.
But you said this was 85, right?
Yeah, this aired October 85.
Fall. Yeah, that would be.
You know who they should have had in We Are the World? They should have had Bruno in We Are the World.
Yeah.
Could have really classed it up. And, you know, pull out a harmonica, which, you know, I just mentioned this. In that Shakespeare episode, which I think is called Atomic Shakespeare, there's an extended sequence where they break into a musical number and Bruce Willis' his character starts singing Good Lovin'. Mm-hmm. And he pulls out like a harmonica in the middle of it. You know, everybody in their period costumes singing Good Lovin' in front of like in a church setting, and like everybody's like doing the background vocals. And when he pulls out that harmonica, it's gold.
He plays one in the pilot too.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's really playing that one, but it doesn't seem his style.
Yeah.
But he's playing Blue Moon.
Well, yeah, it's great theme song though.
Yeah.
Great theme song. Okay, so the other thing. This has been a pet peeve of mine for years. And when I actually, in preparation for doing this, it seems like, well, maybe my opinion isn't as controversial as I thought. Maybe it's not quite as accepted as I thought it was. But, I mean, first of all, what do you think? Do you think my opinion would be that it's commonly accepted that having the characters get together, in the words of Ted Knight, ruins the show.
Right.
And that's the commonly held perception is what I would have said.
Yeah.
Not that I believe it, but that's what many people believe that. And ever since, there's many TV shows,
right,
as we meant, you know, that.
And we talked about that with Cheers.
Right.
We certainly didn't buy it there. And
right.
I just don't think you can make rules like that.
Right.
If you handle anything right, it's going to be interesting.
I think it's become shorthand over the years for other shows, kind of thinking, oh, we can't do what happened in Moonlighting or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And on one of the DVD interviews, they sort of get to that, and Bruce Willis is the one that starts to say, well, everything was going to change, and then Glenn Gordon Caron kind of interrupts and says, as well. No, he definitely takes exception to the presumption that the show would decline naturally, that was going to be the end of it. And it seems like Bruce Willis is kind of going there, and he kind of cuts him off and says, no, it didn't have to be. And he says, well, it was going to be different. And he's like, yeah, it was going to be different, but didn't necessarily have to be bad, you know.
Right.
And I think that's more the case.
Yeah. I mean, if they got married and had kids, and maybe, that would be boring.
Yeah.
And I guess the idea is like the equivalent of dating in the first part of dating being exciting before it becomes something else.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that something else is boring.
Right.
I mean, in a way, you're trying to get to that something else. So.
Yeah. But I mean, like the Thin Man, I mean, you had these movies where about a married couple that was in love, and
right.
You know, there's kind of this sophisticated level of, you know, not fighting all the time, but still, you know, that worked. I mean, I think that's kind of lazy to say that, and that's definitely not the case with Moonlighting.
Right. And why would they stop fighting?
Right. Yeah. There's really no reason to
unless the reason they're fighting is just pent up sexual frustration.
Right.
And I don't think that's what it was.
Well, and I think it's weird because so when it was late in the third season when they did finally consummate their relationship, and I remember watching that and just being they kind of treated it kind of like in a cartoonish over the top fashion. They were like breaking furniture and like literally rolling around all over the place, and it was definitely not. It was kind of more of an animalistic kind of thing, and maybe they did have the thing of like, where do we go from there, but. I mean, I think the show's ratings peaked with that episode, and then it started going down after that, but there was so much other stuff going on.
Right.
That it's like there's a perception that they got boring, but really, they didn't have David and Maddie. They weren't together anymore after that. They didn't even bring them together. They kept finding contrivances to keep them apart. Yeah. So it was almost like the opposite.
And Sybil Shepherd was pregnant somewhere in there, too, right?
Yeah, she got pregnant. Bruce Willis made it, you know, Die Hard.
Yeah.
And it was almost impossible to get them together at the same time. And with the show's production schedule as hectic as it was, they really had to find ways to physically keep them apart. And Moonlighting wasn't Moonlighting without the two of them. They did bring in Curtis Armstrong, but if you watch some of those episodes from season 4 and season 5, it's almost like it's their show. It's not even David and Maddie anymore.
Right. It's Mr. Pesto and or like a lot of things with like Bruce Willis and Curtis Armstrong. Right?
Yeah. And then or maybe like Maddie and Agnes kind of pairing them off. And in fairness, I mean, it did take a toll on the characters in the first couple of seasons. They were in all the scenes, and they really had to carry a lot, and with all the dialogue and everything. But man, it almost seems like nowadays, if you could do like 10 episodes a year, they could work around movie careers and stuff, and you could do 10 episodes. I mean, is it fair to say that Moonlighting was years ahead of its time, and that formula would have worked so much better today? Yeah,
clearly it influenced other things like Arrested Development, and probably Community, and you know, any of these kind of meta shows.
Oh yeah,
especially ones made by people around our age or a little older.
Yeah. And that's one thing we didn't necessarily get into a lot of is the whole breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah.
And there's some episodes where they're just totally doing that,
right?
Like addressing the camera.
Like you suggested the season 2 finale, and I just watched the 10 minutes at the end that you told me about.
Oh, right, with Camille, the episode with Whoopi Goldberg and Judd Nelson.
Right, where they actually like run off a set and off the soundstage and in the back lot and
right,
and say goodbye to people for the summer.
Yeah. And they have like and tellingly, they've got that long, that's the one where they do like the long goodbye with David and Maddie, right?
Yeah.
Where they go to their cars, like at a big parking lot, and they kind of have this long drawn out goodbye where
that's definitely like they both want something.
Right.
You can tell.
Yeah. I mean, they're kind of, something is left between them, but they kind of say, well, it'll keep until after the summer. It'll keep until the fall.
Yeah.
And they just kind of like keep looking back at each other. And you know, that was an interesting tease for the audience, but clearly everybody knew, you know, what was going on there, and they were playing up on it. But so what happened was with the show was they brought like Mark Harmon on as a romantic interest for Maddie.
Yeah.
They brought, you know, the character got pregnant. She impulsively married somebody that she met like on a train. I mean, all these kind of weird things started happening, and that creatively, that's what hurt the show. And there was a writer's strike that really killed the show's momentum. And I think ultimately it was just the fact that they couldn't get Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd together and keep the show's momentum going for so many reasons that's what killed the show, if anything did.
That sounds right. I mean, and I feel like there are times where, well, Cheers kind of had to do that, but they had an ensemble. But where maybe you could replace one of those people and get something different. But I don't know if you could with this.
Yeah.
You would have to do like Cheers did and come up with a totally different character.
Yeah.
And just a different relationship.
Yeah. Their chemistry was so essential to the show that, in retrospect, they would have been much better off not even trying to do 20 episodes. Don't even shoot for that.
Yeah.
Just concentrate on doing like a dozen great episodes a year. But, television didn't support that back then. That wasn't
Right.
the way it worked. And as a result, they wound up with like 60-some episodes and this kind of like... And I guess, we've kind of alluded to the DVD. The DVDs are out of print, I think. They were released like in 2005 or something. The show has been in reruns periodically, but it's never been on any streaming service that I know of.
Those DVDs are distributed by Lionsgate, but there's a Buena Vista logo at the end, so this should be on Hulu.
Yeah.
I mean, there might be some weird legal reason that it's not.
Yeah.
And there is, there are music issues. This one opened with you can't always get what you want.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So that's probably a clearance thing, but they cleared it for the DVD. So
yeah, it was interesting. Like in the commentary, Bruce Willis mentions that.
Yeah.
Like he's doing a commentary with the director, and he kind of says something like, "Oh, you want to talk about how you got the Rolling Stones?" And the director's like, just doesn't really have any story about that. And Bruce was like, "Oh yeah, because I know it was very hard to get them back then.
Yeah.
If there's a story behind how they got the clearance, the director didn't know it. So
Right.
unfortunately, they just kind of moved on from it. But
And
it was notable enough to comment on.
Yeah, you really only hear the sort of the choir thing
Yeah.
at the beginning, but still.
And and I don't think there's a lot of music replacement on those DVDs. I mean, it was and there's extras. It's a very well produced DVD set.
It is, and they look really great.
Yeah.
Maybe just those masters had been stored well or something.
Yeah,
But
and it's probably testament to shooting on good quality stock and
Yeah.
with people that know what they're doing and that it holds up well.
Right. Especially that black and white episode,
Yeah.
because that could look crummy, but that looks spectacular.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think if you ask people about Moonlighting, they'll say, well, especially the first couple seasons, and I think even like Bruce Willis kind of mentions that, not necessarily to denigrate the rest of it, but they're kind of emphasizing that. But
Yeah.
like I mentioned, the season 3 has the Shakespeare episode, which is another famous one. I mean, the show is still pretty strong. It's in season 4 when really just things go off the rails, and 4 and 5 are quite forgettable, sadly.
Yeah. Well, it's another interesting thing that Glenn Gordon Caron says is that, which is really, again, ahead of its time, he tried to convince the network to do fewer episodes, and because he thought people would rewatch them because they're so dense that you could show them 2 or 3 times and keep the same audience. And he said that kind of held true, and that's part of how it's one of those shows that gained steam over the summer after the first season through repeated viewings. And clearly, when they would miss their deadline or something, there would have to be a rerun. And that's that's definitely ahead of its time, because that's something people do now because you can.
Right.
With streaming shows, they don't. It's not just the binging of them, but they'll rewatch things. And, a show like Community, where fans were rewatching and finding every little detail in the background and stuff, and really following it. Yeah, this show really would. In the sense, it couldn't have happened now because Bruce Willis was then.
Yeah.
Sybil Shepherd was that age then. But something like it could, or
Right.
It would have fit in this world a lot better.
Yeah, and I hope that people will take that lesson from it. Like, okay, it's easier to do a focused series, with more resources per episode, rather than take that false lesson of, okay, getting the two leads together will kill their chemistry, because I think that's totally false.
Right.
But there are lessons that can be learned from this series, though. And even myself, like, I bought the DVDs pretty much when they came out and just almost forgot I had them for years, and watched the show every now and then. And I think it was on Bravo for a while, but really, it was kind of thinking that we might talk about it this season. That is what made me get out the DVDs and start, I'm just going to sit down and start watching them. And I totally don't regret it, because the show holds up better than, I'd argue, like even most shows from that period. I mean, it still feels fresh today. Maybe some of the fashions might stand out a little bit, but even that is not as much as some of the other ones. I think.
No, and like not like Growing Pains.
Yeah.
Where they seemed like I mean that seemed like a parody of 80s fashion.
Yeah.
I don't know that it really was. I mean, I think it was legitimate stuff people wore, but
Right.
But it seemed so kind of over the top, where this just, some of her stuff, I guess, is a little shoulder paddy, but it's not crazy pastels. And of course, he's just wearing like a suit or sometimes not even wearing a jacket. But
I mean, it's not like Miami Vice.
No.
Which is kind of on around the same time.
Yeah.
But 35 years later, almost, Moonlighting at its peak, this Moonlighting, it still seems as fresh as it did then.
Or a lot of payphones.
Yes, that's true.
And there was a scene in the black and white one where she wakes up from her dream and calls him.
Yeah.
And then he calls back and he has to dial all the numbers. And
Oh, right.
Like, he didn't even have redial.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's right. I think it's a testament to the show, though, that it holds up and we're raving about it.
Yeah.
Even as you mentioned, it's influenced so many different shows, and they use the fourth wall thing very cleverly, and it almost always works on the show. And it shows that quality with good casting and good writing will hold up over time. And some of the other stuff, some of the other trappings of the show that might have felt like a gimmick otherwise, they don't at all, because it all works together. It's just really a fabulous show.
Yeah, I'm glad we talked about it. So thanks again to Dan for kind of hinting at it. And, and I hope to watch some more, especially if they put them on Hulu.
Yeah,
Come
or
on,
anywhere,
Disney.
really. I mean, I'm not sure what the situation is with the show. I wonder about, like, that ownership situation, if there's something, like, as far as I know, Lionsgate might even still have some kind of home video rights to it. Because they're still around, but I don't know. But I'd love to, if they got it out on DVD.
Stars.
Yeah.
Isn't that the last studio that Stars has?
I mean, if they could clear it for DVD, they must be able to clear it for streaming, I would think. So, get it out there somewhere.
And it seems like they're already in good quality, too.
Yeah, I think it could go up there right away. It would be a great show for people to watch a bunch of these. Ideal for streaming today, but we'll have to wait for it.
All right, that's Moonlighting.
This episode brought to you by Blue Moon Detective Agency. If you need to find something you lost, we'll do it for a small cost. This episode also brought to you by David Addison's Adult Learning Course. Learn to behave like an adult in 5 easy lessons. This episode also brought to you by Seagram's Golden Wine Coolers. They're wet and they're dry. And we still have no idea what that means. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.